Do you see this document?
Yes, I do.
And this is her offer of employment.
That's correct.
And if you scroll down to the bottom, is this the offer of employment that you sent to Ms. White?
Yes.
Okay. And there's been testimony throughout today that individuals discuss the offer of employment and employment agreement. I just want to clarify this. Is this offer letter a contract or an employee contract with her?
And the offer letter is not a contract whatsoever.
Okay.
I believe it even states
I'd like to, okay. And I believe, is it in the third paragraph to the bottom? Is that what you're referencing?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. I'd like to now turn your attention to Respondents Exhibit 3, which has also been entered. This is a document that's titled Mid-Level Provider Employment Agreement. Is this the employee agreement that Ms. White had signed?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Are you aware of any other employment agreement that Ms. White would have signed during her employment with New Medical?
No.
And according to the offer letter that we recently showed you, it indicated that her work hours were going to be Monday through Thursday, I believe 8 to 4:30 or 8:30 to 4. I'll show that again. 8:30 to 4. Is that accurate?
At that time, yes.
Okay. And at some point, did the company need to change her work schedule?
Yeah, I think as previously was testified to earlier, we agreed to change the work schedule that the hours that would allow Ms. White to be able to be eligible for our benefits. And then later on down the road, we had requested to change her work hours for additional reasons.
Okay, and that subsequent time when you guys had to change her work hours for different reasons, what were those reasons?
We were really at a crossroads with NewFem. It's been a struggling clinic for us since we've opened it. I think we've had 1 year of mild profitability, to say the least. Our losses in that clinical entity since inception are north of probably $1.2 million, closer probably to $1.3 million. We had some staffing issues. We were at the time fully staffed, and we had made a decision that we were going to try to keep the clinic open rather than shut it down, which is very difficult to do. And with our male clinic, we have a lot of patient crossover, and so it would be very difficult. So we made the decision to keep it open. In order to do so, we needed to turn back on all the advertising that we historically did before. We used to have nice revenues, and our revenues had declined substantially. And in order to do that, and in order to see that patient volume, we wanted both providers at the time to work Monday through Friday, and a set schedule to accommodate what we believed would have been a full clinic schedule.
Okay, and ultimately, did you guys allow Ms. White to keep her original schedule, that being Monday through Thursday?
We did. We accommodated her request after learning of why she couldn't.
Okay. And so you were bringing up the financial state of the clinic, and I believe you just represented that since its inception, you guys were hitting some hardships when it came financially. When did you open the clinic?
We opened it in August of 2015, I believe.
Okay. And walking from 2015, since you guys opened it to current, in 2016, was the clinic profitable?
No.
In 2017, was the clinic profitable?
I think it was mildly profitable. I think we made $8,000-9,000 that year.
Okay. In 2018, was the clinic profitable?
I think we lost about $250,000.
Okay. 2019, was it profitable?
I think we lost a little bit less than we did in 2018, but it was not profitable. It was probably a loss of 220,000 or so.
And then in 2020, was the clinic profitable?
No.
And present, as of today, is the clinic profitable?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. And you estimate that since its inception, the clinic has lost, I believe you had mentioned 1.2 or 1.3 million?
Between those two numbers, yes.
Okay. And when discussing the potential change in work schedule, when the company initially asked Ms. White to, as well as the other provider, everyone, to work 5 days a week, you indicated that there was some discussion about potentially closing down and that you had obligations. Was that the first time you guys had discussed, closing down the clinic, or has that been an ongoing discussion?
It's always been an ongoing discussion. The historical losses were severe. 2017 was a better year for NewFem. We were on the right path. So we believed. The beginning of 2018 was much better as well. January, February, March. Following that, we had some clinical issues, and our profitability suffered immensely. And that upswing we had from 16 to 17 that was going into 18 stopped, and we stopped seeing new patients. We really regrouped, we restaffed, we stopped all advertising. We really weren't, as I mentioned, we staggered in a few new patients, but it was very rare until we got our ducks in a row. And when we got our ducks in a row is when we had asked Miss White to work the 5 days a week, and we were going to turn back on that advertising.
Okay, perfect. And you turned back on the advertisement. At that time, my understanding of the timeline of events that you just discussed, that's when Ms. White requested for an accommodation, working 4 days a week. The company granted that. After that situation where you granted her 4 days a week, at what point, let me strike that, at the time you requested that she work 5 days a week, did you know that she was pregnant?
No.
Did you, at the time you requested that she work 5 days a week, were you put on notice that she suffered from RA?
At some point down the road, we learned about it, but not right away.
Okay. And with respect to her pregnancy, at some point did she take maternity leave?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall in or about when she took maternity leave?
I want to say it was April, May to June, August timeframe of 19.
Okay. And generally speaking, when someone is on a leave of absence, what happens to their benefits during that time?
Oh, per our handbook, the employee is responsible for both the employer portion and the employee portion of the benefit cost.
Okay. And you referenced the employee handbook. If I can turn your attention to Respondents Exhibit 6, which has been entered as an exhibit. Based on your review of this document, is this what appears to be a copy of the company's employee handbook?
Yes.
Okay. And if I can have you turn to page 29 of the handbook. And by you turning, I mean us scrolling down to it for you. There's a policy that states other leaves of absence. Do you see this policy?
Yep.
Okay. And is this the policy you were referencing that discusses that an individual, while they're on a paid leave of, or not a paid, while they're on a leave of absence that they are required to cover not only their portion of their benefits, but also the employer's?
That's correct.
Okay. And when Ms. White went on maternity leave, was that the case? Was she responsible for covering both of her portion and the employer's portion?
We ended up paying our portion of the benefit because we did not want her to go uninsured as a courtesy for working with us and helping her navigate through that. And again, we just didn't want her to go without insurance. So unlike I don't think we've done it for any other staff, we paid our portion of it, which went against our policy.
Okay. So again, this was an exception or a courtesy that you did to Ms. White.
Yeah.
For Ms. White. Okay. And within this handbook, are you aware of, while we have it open, are you aware if the company has any policies that relate to discrimination or harassment in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. As part of our onboarding process with all employees, they go through the handbook that we go through, all the, employment forms, the I-9 and onboarding process and policies, procedures, and all new staff sign off on those things that they've received that training. And it's pretty clear that, those practices are not acceptable here.
Okay. And, we don't have to go to each, but this is the table of contents. Is that non-discrimination, anti-retaliation and harassment policy listed on page 2 of this table of contents?
That's correct.
Okay. And your understanding, does a company have a complaint reporting procedure if someone felt like they were being discriminated against?
Absolutely. It's spelled out in the handbook as to exactly what that process looks like and is supposed to be, how it's supposed to be followed.
Okay. And your understanding, if someone at the clinic felt like they were being discriminated against or they were being treated unfairly, what is your understanding? Who could have they gone to report that?
Yeah, I think they could have gone, our HR manager at the time was in Milwaukee. They certainly could have gone to that individual, or, certainly, whenever there were issues with any staff member, it typically was communicated through myself or Justin. And so, everyone's door was readily available, but, they had to talk about it, to raise your hand and talk about it.
Okay, perfect. So we walked through the financial state of the clinic, and you represented that sometime in 2019, I believe you said May of 2019, Ms. White took maternity leave, and then she returned from maternity leave in August. Can you tell, what are the events that led up to Ms. White's elimination of her position?
Yeah, just financial. I mean, we were, losing between $30,000 and $50,000-$60,000 a month, and we made the decision that Dr. Feliciano, who is already on payroll, who's one of the clinical owners, along with a little bit of additional support from Julie Driscoll, would see those patients, and our goal was to reduce costs as much as we could. In addition to that, we reduced our schedule to be able to make sure Dr. Feliciano could still fulfill his other duties, but it was simply financial.
Okay, and who was involved in the decision to eliminate Ms. White's position?
I believe Dr. Asandra, Dr. Feliciano, myself, and Justin Pulliam.
Okay. Was Gabby Della Torre ever a part of that decision?
I think once we made the decision, we certainly let her know, as well as other staff, but she was not part of that decision to terminate that position.
Okay. And why was it decided that Ms. White's position would be eliminated and not Ms. Driscoll's?
Well, they're very different positions. Julie Driscoll was hired in a very different capacity than as a provider. She was hired to work in our laboratory, obtain certification to be a medical director with the long-term goal of overseeing other clinics, as well as she worked the floor in our New Mill clinic, and she understood the operation of that. She also understood the operation of our New Fem clinic. Potentially could have used her for training other clinics once we got her to be a lab director and other markets and transported her around. The decision came down to Julie's role, again, very different, and she played a very different role in the organization than what Victoria did, and that Dr. Feliciano could also see those patients, and we just have less cost involved in that clinic.
Okay. And shortly after Ms. White's position was eliminated, approximately how long did Julie Driscoll remain employed with the company?
I think she provided notice within 10 days of Tori's position termination, and then I want to say within 30 days she was no longer with us.
Okay. And then following the departure of Ms. White and Ms. Driscoll from the clinic, and to date, has the company hired anyone to replace Ms. White's position?
We have not.
Has the company hired anyone to replace Ms. Driscoll's position?
At the time, and Julie was still here, and I think Tori Ms. White may have still been here. We had hired in a couple of, we've hired many individuals since in a medical assistant capacity, but when we knew Julie was leaving, we had to train another person to help run the lab and do the bulk of the work inside the lab. But neither of their positions were replaced.
Okay. And to date, and to your knowledge, if we focus just on the clinic, have you hired any nurse practitioners to work at that clinic?
No.
Okay. And does the company still continue to run on a limited schedule?
Yep, we were only open 3 days a week.
At any point in your decision to eliminate Ms. White's position, did Ms. White's pregnancy play a role, or was it a factor in your decision?
No.
At any point was Ms. White's RA a factor in your decision?
No.
At any point was the fact that she needed to take a leave of absence or that she could only work 4 days a week, did that play a factor into your decision to eliminate her position?
No.
I have no further questions right now.
Okay, Cross.
Is it accurate to state that after Ms. White's termination, Driscoll became the sole provider?
Not accurate.
She testified that she was the sole provider after White's termination. So you disagree with that testimony?
Her testimony, as I watched, was that her, along with Dr. Feliciano, were the providers, and Julie,
Okay.
Ms. Driscoll, remained with us for approximately 30 days, but we knew within 10 days she had submitted her resignation.
Okay, so she was the sole provider until she left, and then you hired, you said, with the doctor, right?
Dr. Feliciano saw the majority of those patients. When needed,
Okay.
Julie certainly filled in.
Okay, so you disagree. You say she filled in. She said she was the sole provider under Dr. Feliciano. You hired two people then to work under Dr. Feliciano after Driscoll left?
I don't understand where you're getting the two people from.
Okay, I thought you said there were a couple of people you hired to treat patients under Dr. Feliciano after White left. That
We
you had to
hired
hire
no,
somebody to fill in.
No, we never hired any additional medical providers whatsoever.
Okay, no assistants, no medical assistants?
Tiffany Seaman, who we've discussed earlier in the trial, was hired before Julie even left as we were training her. I think Tiffany was hired when Miss White was still there, and certainly we've had staff that have left. We've hired others, but nothing to
Okay.
replace Miss White.
Who are the others, medical assistants that you've hired since the termination of Ms. White?
Probably have to get you a list. It's been 5 or 6, 7 maybe over the last 2 years.
Okay. And then what are the 3 days per week that the clinic is open, you said?
We're open on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday.
Okay. And why were those 3 days picked?
Because Dr. Feliciano has other commitments with his, with New Mill Corporation and our other clinics. And
Okay. Any other reason?
Mondays and Fridays are typically our busiest days. But those are the days that are most accommodating for our patients and allowing Dr. Feliciano with his existing schedule to be able to see patients in that clinic.
Okay. But if Fridays are one of the best days, why is Friday not open instead of Tuesday, for example?
Well,
If you know.
I do know. The exact reason why is NewFem is not profitable. New Mail is. And so I need Dr. Feliciano seeing my New Mail patients on Fridays and also helping our other New Mail clinics around the country on Fridays. So I have to make a balance somewhere, and that balance is that we're not going to see patients at NewFem on Friday. We're going to have Carlos concentrate where there's a lot more profitability for us so we can continue to pay the rest of our staff.
Okay. Did Gabby talk to you about her theory that Ms. White was impregnated by her coworker?
No.
Okay. Do you work with Gabby regularly?
Yes.
Where's her office in relation to yours?
Door or two down.
Okay. Do you talk about business on a daily basis?
Absolutely.
Okay. And personal matters as well on a daily basis?
Sure.
But Gabby never mentioned to you that Ms. White was pregnant?
I don't believe that statement is accurate whatsoever. Or, sorry, but with regards to the what Jody had said, but her questioning on Miss White being pregnant, it was a conversation that we needed to address for the clinic, but there was never anything derogatory.
Not to you, at least. Right?
No. Correct.
Okay. And Ms. Driscoll was needed to work 5 days per week, correct? In her
Yes.
job? And
Yes.
when she resigned, she said she was working 3 different roles. The lab assistant and as a nurse practitioner and one other role. How much time was she spending in the lab, or don't you know?
Up until the time Julie left, Julie spent a significant amount of time in the lab. She had to open the lab, closed it. We've got logs of all of it. Certainly running patient samples. It varies day to day. Certainly there could have been other people in there, but Julie had oversight of that lab. We were in process of her, also getting the required amount of time that is required to have the ability to oversee other labs. So it varied on a day-to-day basis, but there's absolutely no way that one person can run the lab that is not only doing labs for New Mail and NewFem, they're doing labs for 2 clinics. There's no way that someone can run that lab and be a provider at the same time.
Okay. Have the logs been produced in this case?
I believe they some of them have been.
Okay. Ms. Driscoll testified that she'd only seen you a couple of times, 3 times, I think she said, during her employment with the.
I think she testified to that with regards to Mr. Pulliam, but I probably saw her. It depends. She worked at one of our other clinics prior. She'd been an employee since 2016
Okay.
in one of our other clinics. So over the life of my career with Julie, 10, 20 times I've seen her.
No, but I'm not talking about the clinic that was raided and shut down. I'm talking about the one where she worked with Ms. White. How many times had you seen her at that clinic?
3 to 5 times.
Okay. All right. That's all I have for you.
Oh, Brad, I'm not done
Okay.
with you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, redirect.
Sorry.
There you are. All right. Brad, what you described a medical assistant, that there could have been, certain medical assistants that were hired after Ms. White's separation. What's the difference between a medical assistant and a nurse practitioner?
I mean, there are vast differences. One, an education level is tremendously different. Separating them, what we were looking at is probably $100,000 difference in salary. When Julie was brought on, we gave her a role of doing multiple jobs, and I'll be very frank with you, she's much more efficient and effective than some of the medical assistants that we've hired, which allowed her to have that ability. But education level, the amount of pay, and more importantly, with that education, it allows us the ability to utilize that in additional capacities, such as a medical director, especially a medical director in other locations, as you can only oversee so many of these labs as one individual. So they're very important and very crucial to the way our clinical structure is set up.
Okay. And medical assistants, they can't prescribe medication, can they?
No.
And, they can't perform any procedures, can they? They
No.
just take vitals?
No procedures, just vitals. They may give injections or some order that's provided to them by the medical provider, but they can't act on their own.
Okay, perfect. And you testified to Mr. Olson's question that Ms. Driscoll worked 5 days a week because she was, performing different tasks where necessary, the lab, if she needed to work as a NP or nurse practitioner or a medical assistant. Do you recall indicating that to Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Okay. And going back, because you made the decision to hire Ms. White, when you offered the position to Ms. White, she would have been employed for 5 days a week had it not been for her request to work 4 days a week because of family issues. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, you gave her that accommodation just like every other accommodation she requested for. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are there any accommodations you're aware of that she requested that the company denied?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. And to clarify, Mr. Olson had asked you a question on whether you were aware about a conversation that Gabby De La Torre had with Jody Stark about insinuating who the father of Miss White's baby was. Did you ever have that conversation with Miss De La Torre?
No.
Okay. Oh, and lastly, Mr. Olson had asked you about certain logs and whether they were produced. I'd like to turn your attention to what's been marked as Respondents Exhibit 23.
Yes,
Can you see this document?
I can.
We'll try to rotate it so
Oh.
everyone doesn't have to turn their heads. Perfect. Do you recognize this document?
I sure do.
Okay, and what is this document?
It's the log of our controls of who is responsible for opening and overseeing the lab on any given day, and to make sure that that lab is in compliance with the regulatory people that review us.
And you see at the top left-hand corner of the chart, it says the location is New Fem. And this is a chart for the month of September 2019. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I need to state an
if you
objection at
look-
this point.
Hold it.
Hold on a second. There's no foundation for this document. Unless the witness actually created the document, there's no authentication. Even if it's created in the ordinary course of business, or if it's recognized in its form, that's not sufficient. It has to be authenticated by somebody who actually created the document. And this individual did not create this document.
Dealing with what? First of all, ma'am, what are you offering this for?
Mr. Olson had just indicated that was asking our witness whether or not logs were provided. So this is being offered to show that it was provided in discovery. And number two, to show that Julie Driscoll was the operator of the lab for the month of September 2019, which this front cover shows.
Okay, well, dealing with the first one, this is not discovery, and so any issues regarding any discovery enforcement, when the hearing started, that was over. So that's not a fact before me, and my practice is that as to what was provided or not provided in discovery, that issue is dead when it's over when we start. So that's not before me, and I didn't dealing with the understanding regarding the second point regarding that she was doing the lab in September. I don't quite understand the extent to which is that contested in some way, Mr. Olson?
It's not contested. It's just a matter of this document that they're, and
I'm trying to.
It's not a discovery issue either. It's simply.
They can't.
The thing is that
put
in this document and say they can't attest to the veracity of it with this witness. He doesn't have the authority to do that. That's the only
understanding. The thing is, and I am indicating that my understanding of foundation is that it depends on what it's used for. For example, that if somebody is making a decision and relies on a document, if this was a document, for example, that he considered in making a decision on what the financial needs of the company were, then whether or not he created it regarding foundation would be irrelevant, because the point is that if he, necessary foundation depends on its use and what it's being asked to deal with. Determining what foundation is necessary and dealing with what is contested, I need to find out what it's being used for. And dealing, there's a variety of things to do with that. So I am regarding the basis as asked. I need to determine other things in order to determine whether or not I view that foundation is necessary for this document. Now, as I said in the matter that, as I understand it, one of the two things that is being claimed that this is used for is acknowledged, it appears to be anyway, that it's the discovery issues are not before me. And my understanding is as to the other one, that you're not disputing that Julie Disco was in charge of the lab in September of 2019, right, Mr. Olson?
Well, no, actually, the testimony was that this other individual was hired and she was being trained and she was working in the lab.
Well,
So,
working in the lab, but it being in charge of the lab in the situation that she was being trained by Julie Disco, right?
no, I think the testimony was that Tiffany was hired to work in the lab.
But dealing with that, which, okay, my understanding is then the situation is that the where, and I am trying to, this is response 23. I'm going to do something where I can, okay, so my understanding of that is that regarding any documents regarding the lab, that Mr. Olson, you're disputing that for reporting purposes that Julie Dresco was the one who was signing issues regarding the lab. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, let me just see something here. And that's, what's the bait stamp number on that?
33.
No, our bait stamp number.
Your Honor, we actually never received respondents' Bates number exhibits.
Quite sure that I sent them to you. And matter, so if you, okay, I will, before that, I will send them to you again.